This morning, I woke up and I was a little tight. I mean, my workout is almost always in the morning. You guys know this, right? My routine, stretch, meditation, workout, coffee. We've all talked about this. That's me. Today, I was really eager to get my ride in, but leg day was yesterday, and my adductor was hollering at me, and my right glute was a little tight. All right. Truth be told, I slept through my alarm. We'll get to the ride later. Now it's time for the back nine.
This is the Back Nine with Dennis Williams and Josh Mora.
Dennis, my friend, some of that is true. I actually
could have
was
been your
a little
alarm.
tight.
I could have been your alarm clock. You do stay here in Delray.
Yes.
And I got up and went to the gym, and I had no idea. I thought you were actually already at the gym. I thought you were already on the Peloton.
Usually that's the way that it is, but today I slept through it, or I forgot to set it, and I'm hating myself just a little bit. But
You work out enough. You're fine.
I can use the rest day as it happens.
It must have been the 54 holes we played of miniature golf yesterday.
We did. We played 54 holes of golf. But this is not, it's not like windmills and water features. This was, if we can plug the company, Pop
I'm going to
Stroke.
do a shameless endorsement.
Yeah,
it
was
really
great. Fantastic.
flipping cool.
Yeah.
And really fun. For two people, Rebecca says, you guys are bringing your own putters? I'm not going.
We did grind it out. We take it much more seriously than most of the people who are there with like families. But it was a lot of fun. And we had a couple of matches. We did grind it out because we've established on the show we're competitive that way, even though we're friends.
It was fun. My putting is terrible. Everybody who knows me on the golf course, because I'll talk about it, is like I'm in a transition of trying to work on a new grip, a new stroke, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
So it was not a great time to catch me in a putting contest. But
No, it's a great time for me to catch you because I won twice. The other thing I need to explain, my glute is not tight because we played 54 holes of miniature golf. I worked out in the morning, then was in the car for almost 3 hours driving down here.
Okay.
So it stiffened up just a little bit.
okay. All right. We'll go with that.
We can have a larger conversation later. And speaking of conversations, see what I did there?
I love your
We're going to
segments.
bring in someone for a conversation who is the host of a podcast that is called Lasting Conversations. It is our good friend, Heather Lockett. Heather, so glad to have you with us here on the Back Nine.
Thanks, guys. You guys are hilarious. This was a marvel to behold.
Could you tell, I have so many people I wish you would tell that to that are sick of my dad jokes, like my daughters in particular.
Yeah.
But thank you. But we've known each other for just a little bit here as fellow podcast hosts, and we love your show. Maybe the way to start is, because we do kind of cover similar ground, albeit from a very different perspective. Yeah. So please talk about a little bit how you got into podcasting, what the appeal is for you, and a little bit about what Lasting Conversations is.
Sure. And thanks so much for having me. This is a lot of fun. And that we are in studio together.
Yeah.
You guys usually Zoom in your guests. And I've been on the road and Zooming in with my guests or just filming from wherever on the beach or something. So this is great to be in the studio, person to person, sharing a glass of water, cup of coffee. So I love the opportunity. So Lasting Conversations, we get to the heart of everything. And what I love about your show, both of our shows, has this interesting kismet to it. Like you said, there's different perspectives. And one of the things that was just talked about when you were visiting with me is the notion of curiosity. And I kind of giggled when you were talking about that, which is that's the very first thing that I said in my intro to the show when it was birthed back in 2022. Are you curious about what makes us tick? And so for me personally, I've always had that curiosity about people and kind of a bit of a history buff, but that people have always intrigued me. Where they come from, what are they doing, what are they up to, and that people are very comfortable speaking with me. And so I've had all kinds of iterations professionally. Comes from hospitality, not sports, but I was around sports up in Boston, and I was so thrilled to hear that you guys went to school up there. So yay, New England. That I worked at Ritz-Carlton for most of my career up in Boston. And so we'd see the Celtics and the Bruins, and Boston is just this hotbed of all things sports, right? It's a big deal. So my own background, you guys talk about the back nine, my background is always kind of in servicing people, but really the most fun was seeing how people were dancing. So if you think of 80s big puffy dresses, crazy hairdos, bad white people dancing, that was a lot of fun, and they paid me really well for it. But the next phase of you guys reference which hole it is, but the next phase was being mom. And so that job and career was the best part also. I always stayed with community and doing volunteering and PTAs and all that. But as I was raising my kids, and my husband, we'll probably get into that. I know you guys want to talk to me about dating, was in hospitality, also country club. So again, with the golfing. So I was around golfing and all the metaphors, and that segue the importance to having good food and beverage and the beers after, and the people and the communication along the way. So whether you're sitting to have a good meal or to play a good round of whatever sport it is, that's always something. So now leading into my show, life did its twists and turns. I never expected ever to be on a microphone or a camera to do a show, and yet it absolutely made perfect sense when it presented to me last year, or actually in 2022. I've been on for about a year and a half already. And when I mentioned to the guy at my previous studio, well, my business name is Lasting Conversations, he says, well, you're ahead of the curve from a lot of people. And this fits in perfectly. So it does, because like you guys, I have a wealth of amazing people that love to just share where they come from, what their experiences are, what their professions are, and basically then how they're helping people without getting all salesy and pitchy. It is what makes us tick, what makes us human, where have we fallen and gotten back up, and where are some resources that we can help each other.
That's terrific. What was your transition like, or how have you developed your life on the back nine? I mean, what gave you inspiration to do this? You have to have the time, you have to have the interest, the energy, and the inspiration to do this as well.
You know what? Like I said, it just really fell into my lap almost as a God wink of, now look what you get to be doing. So I didn't have a vision to do it. What I had been doing was kind of personal histories and being in community circles with people and doing sound bowls and meditation circles. And I've always been very good at drawing people together, and whether doing some one-on-ones, I don't do psychology or anything like that, but just sitting and bearing witness to people and drawing folks together to be in meditation or to have tea parties and all kinds of fun things like that, where it's about community. Having the microphone about the same thing was just the natural evolution, if you will. And so that has been the other part of the show. Can feel very meditative almost. And some of the shows I don't have a guest, and kind of the universe paves the way that, just land at this park bench or land at the beach and say what needs to be said right now. Because as you know, we're all going through a bunch of whole different things. And if there's a way of having some calm and having people feel they're okay, even in the midst of a storm, this whole show is beyond me. That's all I know. And I'm just a good steward to bring it forward. And it's the most fun I've had. And I won't say in a long time. I have fun every day. But this truly feels like more of a calling. And I'm very excited about it.
I love that. You said meditation and meditative. And Dennis and our audience will tell you that as soon as that word is mentioned, all the sensors on me light up because I love that stuff. I have found meditation. I've discovered it fairly recently, like within the last 5 to 7 years. So it was not something that was a hallmark of the first half of my life, my front nine. I have tried to recommend it to many, many people for what it has done for me. Mm-hmm. It has been so calming. It has helped quell a lot of my own anxieties and insecurities and allowed me access to what I think is my true self. And yet, while a lot of people have followed that lead, many others have resisted. Have you found that to be the case also, that there are people that resist leaning into meditation? And how do you win them over? How do you express to those who are skeptical what meditation can do for others?
Actually, I love that question and it's almost a two-pronged thing, because you're right. It can feel very intimidating, and you have to resonate with whoever is perhaps your I'm not going to say guru, but a lot of people think that's what it is. And you have to Om Shanti and you have to carve out hours of your day. And really you don't. Sometimes you do, depending what season of life you're in. And it might be really great to go on retreat, to go somewhere by a mountainside, to just take that time to really pause and eat something different and be in with a whole different vibe. So there's those flavors. Now, to your question is, people have to find their own way to it. And I think these days now that there are apps and there are ways that you can listen on YouTube or watch different things to formally meditate and find a couple of minutes. But these days also, you just take your 10 minutes to breathe. You're in traffic or you're at a stop sign. You can literally just go and just let it all out, right? And just breathe. So the second part in terms of the show itself is, at one point I thought I'd be doing meditations or doing the sound bowls, which ironically the equipment didn't want to pick it up. The nature of what the conversation can become kind of meditative, right? If people want to just sort of stop for a moment and consider what is it that someone is saying beyond their words. And I've had plenty of shows like that. The one with Kathy Cray talking about Africa and her work with orphans and education. So on one level, we were talking about the lack of funding and this, but truly there was such a depth to it that became its own you just feel, when we get to the goosebump or tears part of the show, that's meditation.
So we sometimes say we have men listening to our show, but we do have a lot of women that listen to our program. And I'm just curious as to some tidbits, some bits of advice that you would give to any female embarking on the back nine, whether they're on the 10th hole or the 18th hole, maybe something that's pulled from your show or something from your own life. If you could just give us a couple of tidbits. I'd
have to say, don't be afraid. And something that you had shared on my show also is starting from the yes. And sometimes when we haven't grown up with that's even possible. And sometimes there are some very, very dark roads, but just know that there's somebody else out there that has your back, and not to be afraid of an age. Hopefully the tide has turned to feel that, oh my gosh, by 40, I'm washed up, or by this, or 60, I'm elderly, blah, blah, blah. Those maths have been thrown out the window these days, and we don't have to feel old. And I'm sure you have all kinds of guests that are showing you that. I just finished my year 60 and turned 61 yesterday, and I actually, interestingly, feel that I am starting a whole nother ball game. It's not even a back nine on the same course. I'm on a whole different country club here. It's really, really wild and not to be afraid of that. And I had a really great scenario that was mirroring this to me just last week, as a matter of fact, that I went to breakfast and there was this young girl and we were having a conversation, and at one point, again, with some goosebumps, she was asking me some things, and I'm thinking, am I speaking to my 22-year-old self? And then she bursts into tears and says, oh my gosh, I think I'm gaining wisdom to my 60-year-olds, my future self. Now, that's wild. It was unbelievable because life just takes us places that we don't expect and that we can maneuver through and live through. And then we get to another side or a whole new ball game, and it's magical. The other thing that happened was just a couple of days earlier, I had that for myself where I went out to the full moon, and there was this elderly woman who said she was in her 80s, and she sat down, and she was from Boston, and she just started talking. And I have that way with people. They just start talking. But I had my own moment, so this was a few days prior than the diner one, of saying, well, am I speaking to a future self? This woman is showing me joy in life, and she'd lost babies, and she's had a passage of brothers, and just life. Life happens. But she's so full of joy and adventure and travel. I'm thinking, okay, cool. Because my family come from you're done. No. We're just getting started. Or they say in Boston, we're just getting started. We're just getting started. We're just getting started. And so to remember that, we're all just getting started every day.
Love that.
That's a really good perspective. Has that led you to any specific objectives as you take your turn to the back nine? Or maybe it's, I don't have an objective other than to take it one day at a time.
There is that. There really is that 1 nanosecond at a time.
Yeah.
And the notion of a vision board and 5-year plan is kind of shot out the window. That said, there's core. So I know at my core what is important. And so to your question, I've been divorced for a long time. And I needed to have this last decade to figure my own self out and be ready for a healthy relationship. Because one of these moments that you can realize is, oh, that didn't go well because you didn't know what a healthy relationship even looked like.
For sure.
And that I had been with someone from 14 to almost 50 in my high school sweetheart and then right into the next guy. And I needed my own time to actually then be a good partner for somebody else, for myself, but to even, I don't want to draw the next wrong guy, and I don't want to be that for somebody else. I want to be my best version. And so do I see myself remarrying at some point? Absolutely. Do I see myself enlarging my family? I've got 2 grown kids. One is married, and so we have that blend of a family. And then who knows? My next guy should have his own family. And so I look forward to that as well.
We'll be right back. Listeners, you know I've been talking about Pete Learning for a few weeks now. Pete is an out-of-the-box training department that helps companies of all sizes reach their company training initiatives. So picture this. Your company leaders hold all kinds of institutional knowledge, but it takes time for them to create and manage the training that it takes to share that knowledge and other company objectives with their employees. And that's time away from what those leaders do best. That is where Pete comes in. Pete uses artificial intelligence, AI, to create robust, threaded training curriculum quickly and inexpensively. Put simply, Pete is an indispensable partner for any growing company. It is win-win at every level. So visit Pete Learning at pete.com. That is PETE.com.
If you need a benefit auctioneer for your next fundraising gala, hire Eric Goodman, who's broken fundraising records all over the country. Josh and I have known Eric for over 30 years, and he's one of the most passionate, energetic, and hardworking people we know. Eric's consulting strategies and successful fundraising techniques is why he raised $1 million in 10 minutes at a recent event. Visit yourfundraisingteam.com to see a video of his work, testimonials, and then book with Eric today so your nonprofit can have a record-breaking night.
All right, back to the show.
Well, that's terrific. And we had a great conversation with you several weeks ago at the PodFest about exactly this. And I find it so, first of all, so self-aware that you were able to take that amount of time.
Right.
Because we've talked about that on this show, how important that is, especially if you've been married for a really long time. I mean, it could be maybe an intense year or 2 for most. I mean, that's a long time to go a whole decade, but good for you because I think that's important if you do that. So to talk about that journey, how difficult was that to sort of say, I'm going to spend time with myself? Because you really do learn a lot about, it's not all like sunshine and rainbows when you're diving into yourself for 10 years, right? Like you're discovering things. Like, how difficult was that? Because most people just hide from it, get in a new relationship, and stay the way they were, stay stuck.
Absolutely. And that's it. I would have never guessed in a billion years that it would have been 10 years. I probably would have, that would have sunk me if I thought.
If you knew that.
If I knew that you were going to go from 50 to 60, that would have messed me up. Now, the other piece of that was that I was going to a therapist who was absolutely brilliant at the time. And she had me promise her not to never date, not just to hang it up, because most women are a lot, and I still am friends with a lot of women, they are long divorced or widowed and have zero intention of ever going back to a relationship. And she could sense that from my own family background, that would have been my path too. So she made me promise to never give up. Also, not to do that very thing of hopping to the next, to the next, to the next. She says, I have a lot of clients that will just go to the next guy and it just starts all over again. So I've always kept that in mind. Even when I thought, well, maybe it's just easier and I'll just do me. And most of my girlfriends, they're just doing them. And what's the big deal? No, I look forward to that hum of a kitchen together, the hum of a house, and forging a new partnership. I really do.
So that's so interesting. And again, we got into, so our top downloaded episode is, and I think it's because of the title, is Dating After Divorce. And everybody sitting here has been through it. So from your perspective, what is the most challenging part of that? Let's get into this and let's really help our listeners try and navigate this, because I think it's an important topic that we have touched on in this show, and you can really help.
Yeah, and especially to hear it for the men in our audience, to hear it from the female perspective, because it's different.
Okay, you know the real answer?
Yeah.
Starting.
That's good.
Starting. And I mean, and I've had dates and I've had conversations and I've been with guys, but I haven't officially said, and now I'm out in the dating pool. And my daughter, who is an amazing young woman, and she was saying, well, go on the apps and try that. I'd rather be organic. And I know that is generationally a thing. So I will ask you, gentlemen, the notion of being on an app versus is it just going to happen in the middle of somewhere? So the notion of being ready to be ready and knowing, so I appreciate you guys as the gentlemen, that there are great fish in the sea. And at one point, my daughter did set up like a little mini profile, and she said, just see who's there. And she ended up saying, oh my God, Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And she handed me back the phone. She said, this is okay. She got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have a tough time because every kind of age demographic's different.
Yes.
I will tell you this, though, that I think you're limiting yourself by hoping that it's going to be organic.
I get that
because
too.
of the amount of like people that are out there that are quality people. Now, it's like anything. I mean, it might only be, your daughter's right, it might only be 5% of the pool, but it's 5% of people that you're not having any contact with now.
Right.
So, and there are certain apps, Bumble is the one we talk about on the show, where you control the whole thing. Like nobody can even contact you until you're interested.
Until the woman says yes.
Until the woman says, I'm interested in talking to you, and with that match.
Right.
So you seem like that would be the lane. I mean, you don't want 100 guys reaching out to you. It should be a very, very refined, classy, cool selection. You probably could accomplish it with that. I'm not telling you if you're uncomfortable to do it. I just think it's really hard organically. I mean, are you putting yourself in those positions? And it's hard to get yourself right.
Too,
how are you going to put yourself in this day and age? Are you going to be hanging out at a bar and hope some guy walks up and buys you a drink?
And that's just it too, right? When you kind of change lifestyles and are not part of a party scene. So you're absolutely right about that.
So I'll give you one more. I'm sitting here giving advice. I'm going to give you one more piece of advice. One of the things that COVID did, which was one of the benefits of dating during COVID, was people got comfortable with that initial call not being a date in person. So you can actually vet people with a Zoom. And if they don't know how to use Zoom, don't go. They're not smart enough to use Zoom. Dump them anyway. No, I would say that there's some opportunity now to not go spend your time, spend your money, and your time is money. So spend all those things without at least having sort of an initial few calls, few dates, Zoom thing online.
Right.
So
I'm going to, I love that. And I'm going to throw this as a question that will help your listeners too, is sometimes the chitter chat, and we're in Palm Beach County where there are some that are assuming go find a sugar daddy or that the guys want their arm candy. So those are odd demographics. But then the notion of, well, the guys just want nurses or purses. Help us all with that bunch of silliness.
That's definitely in this county, but I just don't think it's. I think that there's probably some good.
Yeah, it's not us. I mean, I wouldn't know where to begin with it. But yeah, of course, I recognize that there are those people out there, and they should be pretty easy to weed out.
The notion of players, and I had a wonderful woman who she doesn't just do dating. She's on my show, but she talked about vetting and that everybody has to do their own personal work first before they go out into a dating pool. So with her clients, they're not a bunch of players. But even she kept saying in Florida, and her clients are also up in other parts of the country. So to help us ladies weed out. And I guess for the guys too, because if they must be mutually afraid, where do you start? Just start. And
there is
say,
that, yeah.
and am I going to be enough, right, for the next
Yeah.
person?
Well, I think it really does come down to what we were talking about earlier in the conversation, which kind of brings it full circle, which is when you do the work to know yourself, when you really examine that, you know what you want. And so you'll be able to recognize, anybody will be able to recognize. Here's a good story. This is several years ago. I went on a date with a woman, and I probably was not as awake as I am now. But we went on a date, and she was lovely. I mean, she was attractive, and we had an intelligent, we had a lovely conversation, and there was just no chemistry there.
Right.
We had a nice time. I said, thank you very much. Let's do this again. While we both looked at each other, knowing we were never going to do it again. It was still a very
We're done
pleasant.
here.
To be fair, you were asleep. Didn't you say you just woke up? You said
She was. But in all seriousness, that's okay. It was a lovely evening.
Right.
Just wasn't going to be a next step after that. Because I think we both recognized he's not what I'm looking for. I recognize she's not what I'm looking for.
Right.
And that's okay. But if you do know, you'll be able to weed out the nurses and purses guys, the guys who are just players
the
pretty
craziest
quickly.
saying?
I like the expression.
Well, the other thing is if you haven't dated much, you got to have a nose to get to. You have to have a few no's to get to the yeses, right? You have to have a few duds to really know. The other thing I will tell you about this area in South Florida, and I think you're the type of person that probably would like this. I mean, you can extend your dating app up to Boston, and there's plenty of snowbirds. Right. You probably need to meet somebody from the Northeast.
Yes,
you need to meet that sort of like humble, hardworking Northeast vibe. You're not going to be looking for a Florida player. So all the more reason you're not going to organically meet somebody from Boston unless they're on vacation down
just
here.
Out at the Starbucks, right?
Yeah, you know what I mean? So if you're really looking for that connection with that right type of person, like geographically and their makeup, because I know what that is, because I grew up in New England. So I could see you doing that and being like here, but swiping right on somebody from Boston.
Right.
Right.
Heather, I think the important thing is that people do the work, right? And your podcast helps us. So how do they find your podcast?
It's called Lasting Conversations, and it is on all of the streaming platforms. So if Spotify, however you want to listen, even just Google or Hey Siri, you can do all that. And it's on YouTube, so the videos are there as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Lasting Conversations with Heather Lockett.
Thanks so much.
So thanks for joining us.
Appreciate
We're
it,
so
guys.
thrilled that you were here with us and in studio with us.
Thank
Thank you very much. So anyway, a few takeaways there, huh?
Yeah, more than a few. I mean, I think going back to something we have talked about, the idea that you cannot, if we're going to focus on kind of the back half of that interview and the idea of how do you prepare yourself for the next relationship, it's doing the work on yourself first, because that puts you in position to recognize what you want and to best learn more about areas where you have to grow and where you have already grown that puts you in the right position to have successful relationship.
I think what it also does, and I'm kind of thinking of this for the first time, is now as Heather or anyone else steps into that potential relationship, you can vet whether that person's done it. Has that person done the work on themselves? Because we've all had our trauma. We've all had our issues. So if you're in that position, you can look across the table from somebody and be like, right away, that person hadn't worked on themselves. They need some help.
Yeah. That's a big part of it, right? If you know that you've done that work and the other person hasn't, you can avoid your next, and for the women, you can avoid your next husband. By the way, I love that term. I'd never heard that before. That's fantastic. Yeah, we'll have to use that at some point again in our lives. But one of the ways that you can do this is another thing that we talked about, and which is a big part of Heather's podcast, are the different types of meditation, right? There's the formal sit down, close your eyes, which I do every morning. But then there's also just being able to take a breath, just being able to learn how to calm yourself and find that quiet space, whether it is stopped at a stoplight or listening to a podcast or doing something
My
formal.
beach walks in the morning because I'm not great at the traditional methods of meditation. So, so there's so many different ways you can do that. And then the fact that our shows really do align with the whole curious and starting at yes and connections with people that you've known for years and bringing them in this format to tell their story.
So we encourage you to join Heather on her podcast, again, Lasting Conversations. We encourage you to come back to ours for our next episode. This is The Back Nine. He's Dennis. I'm Josh. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
We're really happy that you could join us today on the Back Nine podcast, and we're really trying to build a community.
Yeah, so please not only listen, subscribe, follow us, download, share with your friends that you found something in our community here.
We really, really appreciate everybody who's downloaded even a single episode and shared the time with us. We know your time is valuable. Please also give us a 5-star review if you can. Thanks so much.
So I've mentioned Three Bridges Consulting. What they do is they market your company. They lead the creative, they find the audience. What they produce, commercials, social media content, possibly even documentaries. It's long form, it's short form. One recent success story, working with a home services company in Chicago, a company that refaces cabinets. They launched a campaign in January. They had 5 times the revenue of their previous January at $1 million more in revenue than in any prior month after they launched this campaign. Once again, it's Three Bridges Consulting. The number 3, bridgesconsulting.co. The Back Nine is meticulously curated by Janine Stella and recorded at Pixelworks Studios in Delray Beach, Florida.